Episode 4 ushered in some major changes to the game when it was first introduced in both regions. Story-wise, this was the point where many people felt the game had jumped the shark, as it were. Rather than a continuation of the world building established in the previous episodes, this one is a complete departure. If you're new here, the goal is to provide you, the viewer, with a richer experience by exploring the things that make the PSO2 universe what it is. My name is Zio, and I'll be your lore keeper. Today, we're going to a very familiar planet. Maybe you've heard of it before. That's right, it's the blue planet we call home, but in a different dimension. So, why are we even there? To answer that question, we need to take a look at what brought us to this point. The year is AP 241. ARKS had once again restructured. The Council of Six was disbanded, its members placed in leadership roles throughout the newly formed departments. After the events of 2 years ago, we've taken in quite a bit of corrupted photons and needed to be put on ice. But nap time's over, it's back to work. So what's the task? There's been a surge in suspicious ARKS ops as of late, and we're called on to look into the matter. We're sent to Nefarious on a recon mission alongside a new ARKS op by the name of Hitsugi, but things don't go quite as planned. A shadowy figure attacks, and Hitsugi, well, both of them, are back on Earth. The year is 2028 in Tokyo, Japan, in a parallel universe not terribly different from our Earth in the real world. So everyone's into this game, called Phantasy Star Online 2. By this point in our timeline, that would make it 16 years old, assuming it's still in service by then. Thanks to a mysterious energy called Ether, the Earth of the future has experienced a communications revolution. This Ethernet is essentially an evolution of the internet that we use today in the real world. Ether is transmitted via large structures called ESCA towers dotted throughout the globe. So just who's responsible for this technological boon? Meet Mother Core, or Mother Cluster if you prefer. Mother Core is led by a powerful and enigmatic woman known only as Mother. Her disciples each have a naturally high affinity for Ether, and are among the very best and brightest that Earth has to offer. So why don't we take a look at these disciples, as well as Mother herself. First up is Hagith Anie, disciple of Venus. Hagith is the pretty boy president of the YMT Corporation. They're a popular software company that develops the ESCA apps everyone uses, much like the big tech companies in the real world. Thanks to his emerald tablet, Hagith is able to summon phantasms. Since he's such a military buff, these creatures appear as tanks and helicopters, and of course the battleship Yamato. He's pretty much your typical villain, given to fits of rage whenever things go sideways. His first name is a reference to Hagith, the Olympian spirit of Venus. His last name, Anie, is based off of Haniel, one of the 7 archangels in Jewish lore. Haniel is also associated with Venus. Next up, we have Bethor Zelazny, disciple of Jupiter. Bethor is a famous movie director whose obsession with explosions would make even Michael Bay blush. But unlike Mr. Bay, his explosions cause real-world damage. Bethor controls movie-themed phantasms from zombies to giant monsters. His special power is called SFX, which lets him turn just about anything into a bomb. His name is a reference to Bethor, the Olympian spirit of Jupiter, and sci-fi author Roger Zelazny. Next, we have Oak Miller, disciple of the Sun. Oak is a brilliant scientist and mathematician who brings 100% to bear for Mother. Her genius made her something of an outcast, and Mother was the only one to recognize those gifts. Her phantasms are based off scientific and mathematical theories. Being a brilliant mathematician, she has this 100% goofy verbal tick of speaking in percentages. Her avatar weapon is a giant protractor used to create barriers by manipulating probability. Her name is a reference to Oak, the Olympian spirit of the sun, and American author Henry Miller. Next we have her BFF, Phul Janice Laswitz, disciple of the Moon. Phul is a world-renowned best-selling author, but her immense intelligence also made her a social outcast. Just like Oak, she pledges her undying fealty to Mother for being the only one to truly accept her talents. Her avatar weapon is a grimoire that lets her manipulate other people's perceptions of space and time. Her last name is a reference to sci-fi author Kurt Laswitz. Now we're coming to the upper echelons of the group, starting with Aratron Tolstoy, disciple of Saturn. Aratron is an accomplished astronaut, historian, and archaeologist, and sports some of the bushiest eyebrows I've ever seen. He met Mother during one of his space missions and became her longtime confidant. Despite misgivings about the actions of the organization and Mother herself, Aratron still retains his undying fealty to her. Apart from that, he's actually a pretty chill guy. He's definitely the least antagonistic of the bunch. Aratron's avatar weapon is Thor's hammer. Just like its mythological counterpart, he can use it to summon lightning, and slamming it on the ground creates shockwaves. His last name is a reference to Russian author and philosopher Leo Tolstoy. Next up, we have Ophiel Herbert, disciple of Mercury. Ophiel is a master surgeon whose skills are said to be godlike. He's also incredibly charismatic and perhaps the most treacherous member of the group. Ophiel has the ability to brainwash people by manipulating the ether in their bodies, something he would do to Kori, turning her against her BFF Hitsugi and ARKS. On the surface, he seems like a nice guy, but the reality is quite the opposite. His avatar weapon is a set of scalpels. His last name is a reference to American sci-fi author Frank Herbert. Now we come to Phaleg Ives, disciple of Mars, and perhaps the most interesting of the bunch. Phaleg is the self-proclaimed apex of human development, not relying on external forces such as photons or ether. She may be a member of Mother Corps, but she acts completely on her own. Phaleg is easily one of the strongest characters in the entire multiverse, something she demonstrates time and again. Phaleg is a firm believer in the natural growth of human potential. Of course, she can say that being one of the oldest Earthlings, surviving countless generations of triumph and tragedy. Her last name is a reference to Eve, you know, like Adam and Eve. Before we get to Mother, I should tell you there are some big spoilers coming up. So unless you've finished episode 4 or just don't care, turn back now. Mother is the mysterious leader of Mother Corps and the reason the Earthlings have access to ether in the first place. Remember how the Photoners tried to clone Xion? Well, Mother was their first crack at it. Because she wasn't quite up to scratch, the Photoners cast her into the garbage dump of subspace. Eventually, she'd crash into planet Earth, altering pretty much everything about it. The shattered remnants coalesced into what would become the Earth's moon. Mother would remain dormant for millennia until being discovered by Aratron. So it wouldn't be too far-fetched to say that Aratron is this Earth's equivalent to Neil Armstrong. Mother had nothing but contempt for the Photoners that spurned her. Despite learning the Photoners were extinct, this did nothing to quench the flames of vengeance. In spite of this, she was actually very sweet and caring to her disciples, treating them like a mother would her own children. Because of her background, she was able to empathize with her disciples, many of whom were social rejects themselves. So that PSO2 game everyone loves so much? Well, guess what? It's not as innocent as you might think. It's actually a backdoor into Oracle's dimension used to spy on ARKS, thanks to Ether. In the end, she just wanted to be loved and accepted, just like anyone else, be they human or broken Xion clone. Speaking of Xion, I think it might finally be time to tackle her, and by extension Xiao. As always, thanks for watching. Until next time, farewell.